Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, we're going to focus almost purely on transfers. I tweeted out late last night the updated 2023 transfer chart. If you've been following, I've done this a couple years now, trying to give us a little bit of an overall picture as to United's plans for the summer. Put down a big list of the names. And from here, usually what starts happening is some of the names are expanded if United seem to be struggling to get the top names on the list, or some of the names are narrowed as they eliminate some of the ones that probably just don't fit. So as I go through this, just bear in mind, in no way is this an exact science. Things rarely ever go to plan. Last summer, the plan initially was Timber, De Jong, and Nunez, and United ended up getting none of them, with Timber, of course, not happening, moving to Lisandro Martinez, De Jong not happening, ending up with Casemiro, Nunez not happening, and thus, without getting a striker, switching to the priority of a right wing and getting Antony into the team. Things don't always go to plan. Same with the year before, same with the year before that. However, I can say that this year, I am certain that John Murtaugh and Erik ten Hag have put in a bit more work than previous summers in order to be prepared. Obviously, the thing that throws it up in a little bit is whether the takeover has any effect on this, what happens with all of that, and how far the budget goes. But another major consideration for that is going to be sales. So let me get into this and I'm going to explain some things. Now, this budget here, in years past, I would stick at the top something like 150 million, net spend or something like that. So what I've said now is sales determine how far the plans go, because really all it comes down to is FFP. As I've explained before, if you haven't watched one of the previous videos, you can go back and watch that on FFP. But effectively, sales have a huge impact on your FFP. But also so do loaning players out, getting wages covered, things like that can make a big difference, as effectively allows you to improve on what you can do. Sales of players who are paid off, essentially meaning they're academy players or players who we've purchased more than 5 years ago that are at the end of their contracts, their amortized value is already down to, or their amortization is already down to zero. So when you sell them, it's all profit and can all be added. Just to reiterate how this works again, let's say you sell Scott McTominay for 20 million. You didn't pay anything for him. That's 20 million. That's counted towards player profit. What does that mean? If you buy a 100 million player, it'll get amortized over 5 years, which means 20 million a year, which means the sale of Scott McTominay for 20 million, as an example, covers a 100 million player purchase this season. Not next season, but this season. So it gives you more flexibility in the current season, but you have to continue to sell for it to continue to catch. The cap for FFP is 90% this year, which means all of your football costs, transfer, amortizations, wages, etc., all that have to add up to 90%. United are something like 75% going into the season. They actually clear quite a bit off when you factor in Ronaldo leaving, when you factor in the departures of free agents. We'll talk about some of those. And then some other sales and things in here, which I realize I was not able to fit on this, as I usually have a little thing that shows some of the departures, but it's going to bring it all down. United aren't going to want to aim for that 90% cap simply because it goes to 80 the next year and 70 the next year, and so while revenues can increase, you're going to likely want to pull things down. What's not on the chart, and just to cover first before we get into all of these, is new contracts. New contracts for Dalot, Rashford, and Luke Shaw are very much in the offing, that are sort of separate to all of this. That's going to factor in that they need them. And then the free agent departures of, I believe, Tom Heaton, Phil Jones, Axel Twanzebe all come off of the books without any sort of connection. And then there are peripheral sales that can help somewhat inconsequential sales that have nothing to do with needing replacement or anything like that. And those names are the players who are for sale. These are already known, but would be Eric Bailly, Alex Telles, Brandon Williams, perhaps, and Mengi, players like that, peripheral players who are just likely not to have a space in the team. Those do all add to the budget if they are able to be sold, even if it is just for a little, because they're pretty much all amortized or don't have any amortization value at this point, or it's very minimal, like in the case of Alex Telles, and their wages would fully come off the books. So that's all separate. Those are things that the more of those they can get done, the further down these priorities that United can get. So let's start with priority one. Priority one is no sales unnecessary. This is the number one area of focus for Manchester United, which is forwards. And the plan is pretty simple. Purchase your List A striker. If there's no, fix that. If there's no List A striker, sign a List B striker, and you might have more money for priorities. However, depends. Some of those List B strikers are still pretty expensive on their own. List A strikers include, and I'm going to go through every player, every situation. The names I bring up here are names that I've heard for my information, including background on, why they're a target, why they're on the list, and what the situation is per my info. Some of it is information that's out there in the space from very, people I would consider reliable that I've been able to ask about, and, not that I need to confirm all of them, but that I also feel is worth talking about. Victor Osimhen. The biggest concern with him is price. He's an amazing talent, viewed as a fantastic potential striker for Manchester United. Harry Kane, United are still in touch with him, or his representatives, I should say. Biggest things there are going to be if Spurs get Champions League, if Conte stays or departs, and obviously the price when you're dealing with Daniel Levy. If they do not get top four and Conte departs, then Harry Kane would like to stay in England, and could be something done there, but he could be quite expensive for a player who's getting a bit older. Obviously an amazing player, fits the team perfectly, but you got to start worrying about average age, right? And then there's Gonzalo Ramos, who is considered, as far as I understand, to be potentially the best fit or the most valuable of these top targets in terms of a balance of talent, fit, and price into the team. Could be available for something in the range of 80 million euros or so, which could be significantly less than Victor Osimhen, but we'll see. He's doing really well. He's a player that fits. He's a player that Ten Hag likes specifically. So keep an eye on those three as the major targets as we move in towards the summer. I would definitely put Osimhen and Ramos as the more likely of the two or of the three, and at the top of that list. In terms of sales, Anthony Martial, the biggest problem is injuries make it difficult to find buyers, as nobody really wants to take a punt on him. Obviously, we don't have to sell to buy here, but if we are able to move some of these players on, it adds and reduces that FFP cap. I mean, Anthony Martial, if he could be sold for 15, 20 million and his wages come off, well, his wages will cover the striker's wages and more, because he's going to be on more than whatever striker comes in, unless it's Harry Kane. It makes a huge difference in terms of getting further down our priorities list and being able to do more if you can move Anthony Martial. Facundo Pellistri, there's interest in him staying. The club like him. He loves United, but he's not getting the minutes, and so it's likely that he will be moved on. Loans. Anthony Elanga is likely to be loaned out but not sold. And then Amad Diallo. Basically, he will stay if there's deemed to be enough play for him. That's an important part of his progression. He's viewed as a great talent. Club would like to have him around, but at the same time, they're not going to have him sitting around not playing. It's going to be a determination whether or not he goes or stays based on if there's enough minutes available for him to be continuous development, but also to utilize his skill set and all of that. So not 100% decisions made here by Ten Hag on these. It's only March. Some of these things will change. Obviously, the targets of positions, overall have been made. A lot of the basic contexts have been made, but a lot of these individual decisions are going to be made a bit closer to summer on all these players. List B strikers, Benjamin Šeško, who we know about, but is viewed as not ready by the club. Kolo Muani, viewed as a great talent, offered to United by his representatives, but quite expensive and a bit of a risk just at this point in time. And then Vlahovic from Juventus is one they've been keeping an eye on, monitoring his situation, but he's not necessarily viewed as the best profile or fit for Manchester United. A good player, could be available, maybe not that expensive depending on the situation with Juventus, but again, is he the best fit? Not sure. Some of these are not that cheap, so you look at part of the issue is if you're going to that list B option, you may not save that much money going from a list A to list B on some of these, and it could be a bit more risky. So that's the situation with strikers. Far and away the first priority. I'm only expecting one forward to be brought in based on the names they have. Jadon Sancho, Rashford, Garnacho, Antony, person who's brought in. God, am I missing somebody? And then, we'll see what else happens with Ahmad and some of the other players. I'm only expecting one, if, for instance, I'll just say it bluntly, if, for instance, something happens and 11 doesn't return and Martial is sold, then you're likely either seeing Ahmad or Palestri stay or someone else brought in, but like a young, not expensive player or an old veteran for striker. But it is very unlikely at this point that Weghorst will be signed by United. Moving on to priority number 2, again, no sale necessary here. Like from an FFP standpoint, it's more a squad position standpoint, and that is goalkeeper. This is something I've heard that is a major priority to resolve this summer. That doesn't necessarily mean that a big goalkeeper will be signed, but it is a priority. Heaton will be departing. There's the situation that has to be resolved with Henderson, and that's first and foremost. The Dean Henderson situation has to be resolved. He wants a guaranteed number 1 spot. There is questions over his attitude. If he does not have that guaranteed spot, he is not going to be staying at United. That is the basic thing. And after the interview and everything that's happened, it seems unlikely that he will be sticking around. The next thing is negotiating David De Gea's salary reduction. Those two things are going to occur, and then it really depends on if Dean Henderson is sold, which is likely, then a keeper is brought in no matter what. A goalkeeper will be brought in if Dean Henderson is sold and moved on. That is 100%. If David De Gea does not agree to a new deal on a lower salary reduction and is released, then they will spend big on a goalkeeper, get the top goalkeeper target. If David De Gea does agree to a reduced contract, they could still get a top goalkeeper target. It just kind of depends. It's just less likely. There's a little less money. So it's up in the air. It's hard to say. It really is going to come down to how they view the overall budget, striker, and other positions, and everything that happens. But the main targets are Diogo Costa, who is absolutely the top goalkeeper target, and Raya. And I know there's other names, but I'm not sure of other names myself. Aside from those two, I can be certain of our names. There will be a goalkeeper signed. It just depends how much money can go to it. Henderson's situation has to be resolved, as well as David De Gea's, for this to happen. Unless they decide to keep Dean Henderson and make him number 1, then a goalkeeper won't be signed unless it's like a old veteran or something. But you might see a youth player take up the 3rd spot then. Moving on further from that, into the next list of priorities, one separate scenario that's there is one center half is expected to depart from the regular 4 that we have. And right now it's expected to be Maguire, because, Lindelof essentially is the left center back backing up Martinez. And I think they're looking for a young, likely right-sided center back. I've been confused a couple of times because I've been trying to tell. If Lindelof were to depart, they'd be looking for a young left-footed center back, but with Maguire likely to be the one to depart, per my understanding, they're looking for a young right center back. And the main name I have there is Timber. There's probably other names. I've heard of Kim Min-jae, but I'm not sure how legitimate those links are yet. I know that Urian Timber is still someone that Erik ten Hag really likes. He has the flexibility as well, I think, to play at right back, which we'll talk about in a minute. Moving to the midfield, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. I know people are expecting and looking for, let's get, Frankie de Jong or Jude Bellingham in, or something like that. It's going to be tough in terms of the cost, in terms of the willingness of the players, and in terms of ins and outs. So starting, how does this all work? There's a couple of pieces of information that I have on this. At center mid, defensive mid, McTominay has been targeted by West Ham and others. I think there's a story about Newcastle today and Eddie Howe wanting him too. If he's let go, that will obviously add to the amount that can be spent in the midfield. Without him leaving, you've got McTominay, Casemiro, Fred, Eriksen, Bruno, and Donny van de Beek. You're going to need a departure. You're going to need a departure there, likely for something to happen. And in terms of list A, list B, based on budget and willingness of targets, it's going to be somewhat complex, and it can even tie into the attacking midfielder situation. It's likely that Donny van de Beek will be moved on if possible. There's interest from some teams in the Premier League as well as elsewhere. And one of the interesting pieces of information that I've heard recently is that Hannibal Mejbri, the club, want him around next summer. At least right now, that is their plan, to have him around next summer. Summer and into the year. And he could be the Van de Beek replacement in the team. If Van de Beek is sold, then that might free up some more budget towards, buying a midfielder. So it could be a little complicated. But if Hannibal departs and Van de Beek is sold, then United would be in the market for an attacking midfielder. So let's talk about that scenario. If Van de Beek departs and Hannibal goes back on loan, then you're needing somewhat of a young attacking midfielder type of player, and the names I've heard for there are Taylor Booth, Kudus from Ajax, and McAllister. And those are some of the names to kind of keep in mind around that United are watching. Now, again, all of this may not get done this summer. Sometimes, this is like the full plan to fix the team, right? Is the forwards, the goalkeeper, the center back to shore up the rotation, get a younger one, a center mid, an attacking mid. Like, this is the entire team. It may not all get done this summer, and people have to understand that. But there's contingencies and plans in place that could, to see how far we get on all of these, on all of these plans and situations. So, Hannibal departs, Van de Beek is sold. You might see an attacking midfielder come in to the situation. But the current plan is, let's look at it this way. Here's a current possible plan. Van de Beek is sold. Hannibal stays. McTominay is sold. You got a good budget for a defensive midfielder or center midfielder, someone in that position, plays around, Casemiro, Fred, one of those spots. Who could you have in there? Well, here's the names. The list A, the players that they would love to get to if they can afford it or if they could get them, is De Jong, Jude Bellingham, and Rice. Obviously, 3 top targets, 3 who would fit into the team really well, expensive players, and going to be competitive to get them, but also maybe a lack of willingness. De Jong still doesn't want to leave Barcelona, wants to stay there as of now, and they may not want to sell him at this point in time. Jude Bellingham really just doesn't want to join United, and it's going to be extremely expensive. I don't think there's any chance we can get him this summer. And then Declan Rice, who's more likely to leave West Ham now than he's ever been before. Going to be competitive for him with Arsenal, Chelsea, etc., potentially in the race. Again, it's about whether they view he's the right fit and worth the type of price that's going to be asked for from West Ham. They're building out a big list here, and so my assumption is that a midfielder will be brought in, but I'm leaning towards it being someone more from the list B as a more likely scenario. So list B there, I know that Zubimendi has been scouted. Lavia, there's legitimate links to. Nunes from Wolves, who was previously Sporting, has been watched for some time and could be an option. And then Sabitzer was somebody that they considered bringing in as well. So based on the end of the year, we'll see what happens with that. And then finally, at right back, I've been told that currently Wan-Bissaka has essentially worked himself back in and his departure is not being planned. They've looked at a lot of right back names, it's true, but it's sort of looking like maybe they push it to another summer, see how Wan-Bissaka and Dalot do, view that they could use some coaching. Again, this is an area where there's probably an individual decision that needs to be made by Erik ten Hag, but also based on these other priorities. We have 2 right backs at the moment. Maybe they're not the best, but or necessarily 100% the future right backs for the club, but at the same time, there's no guarantee that you bring in someone else, and he is. So that's a little bit up in the air. So, again, it's a big list right now. I'm going to keep adding names to it and keep narrowing some down as some are eliminated. The plans may change as we move towards summer based on where things end up, based on the takeover, all of that. And then obviously there's some individual decisions that'll have to be made about players, young players like Ahmad, Hannibal, Dean Henderson, David De Gea, all of that. They're going to affect where it's spent, whether to prioritize Osimhen or Ramos or someone like that. Those are still the individual decisions that have not been made 100% yet, but usually closer to the end of the season they will. Right now, Erik ten Hag is working on it, but is obviously very focused. Once, the budget is settled, top four is settled, and all that, it makes a big difference. Okay? So thank you for watching this video. I hope this answered a lot of questions. Hope it was very helpful to everybody. And I'll keep doing updates on this as we move forward. Okay? Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.